purchase. We have 4 properties on Ontario and West Street in the city of Albany. So I'm Adam Zarenko. I'm the executive director of the Albany County Land Bank, and from our office, I'm joined by Will Sekula, who is our planning and projects coordinator, and Amanda Wyckoff, who's our director of operations. She's also our procurement officer and sole point of contact for this RFQ, as you've probably hopefully seen in the RFQ already. We also have our project counsel on the line just listening in, and Brian Lawler. Hi, Brian, thanks for joining. And we'll have probably some people log on. We're actually getting an encouraging amount of interest in this project, which is great. So we're going to just go through this PowerPoint, and then we have time for questions at the end. But we have this capability. If you want to start putting questions along the way in chat, we can try to address them at the end. To the extent we don't know the answer, or we don't have a concrete answer to your question and we have to confer internally, we will include these in the Q&A that gets posted in accordance with our procurement timeline here. So Will, why don't you just fire away to the next slide. So this is what we hope to cover today. We want to cover. This is the project site. We'll have more details in this presentation. But if you haven't, please go to our website. We have a whole project page dedicated just to this RFQ, and we are adding and have added just about every piece of information that we have about these properties, or about any kind of prelim work we've done, which frankly isn't too much. And we do deal in tax foreclosed, vacant and abandoned properties. So we share what we know, but anything that we do have is on that website, including many more pictures, 3D walkthroughs of the buildings that we've taken for everyone to support this, so on and so forth. But these are the 4 sites. It's comprised of 2 buildings and 2 lots, contiguous lots clustered around Ontario and West Street. These were acquired by the Albany County Land Bank from Albany County through tax foreclosure. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the properties and other parts of the RFQ today, but this is essentially what we hope to cover on the left-hand side. Will, why don't you go to the next slide, please? So just a quick primer. I know some folks are more familiar with land banks than others. There's still some questions about what a land bank is. So basically what we are not-for-profit corporations set up under New York state law that are tasked with and provided the statutory authority necessary to reclaim vacant, abandoned, or tax foreclosed properties. And there's now 26 land banks across the state of New York, with a few more, I think, coming online, coming out of the pandemic. And what we basically do is assist our local governments that set us up with reclaiming vacant properties, and try to accomplish outcomes that government can't do and the real estate market won't do on their own. And so we sit, next slide, Will, if you don't mind. We sit kind of in the middle of a lot of the different stakeholders that it takes to reclaim vacant properties, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with how challenging that could be, and use them to create these outcomes to help revitalize neighborhoods and accomplish community development, which can lend itself to a lot of different shapes and sizes, especially affordable housing and even economic development when done appropriately. So this is where our land bank has been functioning historically. We were established in 2014 by Albany County. But we work with just about everyone. There are some folks, I think, on this call that work with other land banks across the state or have worked with our land bank. And hopefully more and more people are familiar with land banks. If you're not, check them out. If you work in other parts of New York State, there are many other land banks that have opportunities and are looking for partners, just like we are today. So why don't you go to the next slide, Will? Please keep in mind these key dates. This is our procurement schedule. We are where the giant blue arrow is. The questions need to be in by Friday, May 20th, and we're going to have them up, all the answers to the best of our ability, by Friday, May 27th. 2 other very crucial dates for people on this call or people interested that are listening to this. One is responses are due if you wish to express interest in being part of or partnering with a development team in the community hub portion of this project, which we'll talk more about. Then the overall response, and those are due Friday, June 3rd, and there's a place on our website where you can fill out a form and we'll get you posted up as an interested party. Overall responses are due Friday, July 22nd, 2022 by 4 p.m. That's a hard and fast date. Those are the due dates. We stick to our procurement timeline, so no harm in getting them in earlier, but we're not going to consider ones that come in after the due date, especially when we have a project that has so much interest like this one, just out of fairness to everyone. So, Will, why don't you go to the next slide? So I'm just gonna kind of set this background, and then Will's gonna take us through some specifics of details of the properties themselves. But this particular redevelopment effort has been a long time in the making. Our land bank has been focusing on acquiring and assembling vacant properties across Albany County, but especially in the city of Albany, where most of the properties are made available to us from Albany County for many years now. And we've been doing it strategically and land banking, as the term is, at our cost and expense to warehouse these properties. And when individually they're very challenging, but we see the bigger picture, the long game, where when we start to assemble these, we realize we can support more transformative outcomes by just taking time to think about, what can we do here? How can we create an outcome that benefits a lot of the stakeholders that were in that diagram that you saw, and do things sometimes a little differently. And so this is the third iteration of our cluster redevelopment strategy, this particular RFQ. We've done a similar effort in the south end that had about 70 plus vacant properties with the city of Albany. We're recently moving forward on our second cluster at Henry Johnson Boulevard and Clinton Avenue, where we're doing a request for proposals. And this is our third one. This is probably one of our most challenging sites, but it's also the one we think poses some of the greatest opportunity to do something a little bit different. And so what we were looking for, what we would love to see, and what we want to see is we're trying to get responses from qualified and experienced development teams. Teams being the operative word here, to plan, finance, and help redevelop the site into a high quality mixed use development that includes it's very simple at its basis, two components. Part of the project needs to have affordable housing. It's up to the development team to define what that looks like, whether that's home ownership, mixed income rentals, condos, whatever, CLTs, whatever. We're not limiting exactly what that can be, and it's not only limited to affordable housing, but here in Albany, like everywhere else in the country, we have a crushing undersupply of quality affordable housing. And just about every development project we do, that's at the core of what we're trying to create, is increase that supply and meet some of that unmet demand. Another unique component here, a more unique component, I should say, is we think, and the community and our stakeholders that we've been working with seem to agree, that this site in particular lends itself to some sort of one-stop shop or opportunity to co-locate either complementary or community-based organizations, amenities, small businesses in one space. It's physically located in a pretty good location strategically in terms of transportation access. Will's going to take you through all the planning wonk stuff that we put in the RFQ. But we have been doing a lot of work leading up to this and our other development efforts where we engage the community. And when we talk to the community, we talk to just about everyone we could talk to, from residents to neighbors to elected officials to state officials to neighborhood associations. And we try to understand what people would like to see at our sites, but also try to manage expectations and balance and educate folks on how difficult it is to redevelop sites like this, and kind of balance that teeter-totter of what's possible without, and what we can stretch and accomplish without a project becoming unviable or infeasible where it doesn't happen, right? And so that's what we're trying to do here. This vision has come out of a lot of that work. And what we're also trying to do with our way of connecting on the ground community groups is, when we got these properties from Albany County, we had a lot of interest, and we still continue to get a lot of interest from people, organizations, nonprofits, you name it, in the site, because of the merits of the site and the attributes. But if you've done any due diligence so far and you've seen the 3D walkthroughs and you've been to the site, you realize that this is going to be a very capitally intensive project that requires someone to put a project together. And none of the organizations that have come to us that were interested in being at the site had the capacity to redevelop these sites. At the same time, we talked to a lot of the development community developers from across the state and beyond that want to be part of reclaiming vacant properties and redeveloping, but we see a disconnect between their ability to do that and who's on the ground, what local organizations could be partners in that. And so we're essentially trying through this RFQ to bridge those two considerations and kind of put it out there where developers could basically see what organizations are interested in potentially partnering, and just start to get those conversations going, in the hopes that would kind of become an organic collaboration and come to us as a response together, like a team responding together to accomplish the goals and visions set forth in this RFQ. So Will, I think that end of my intro slides, if you want to dive into some project specific details.
Sure, absolutely. Here's another map site. This, I believe, is from either the city's comprehensive plan or another plan that the city did. I believe there's a mid-town corridor study as well with Albany. But here's another sense of the sites. These sites are very well, as Adam said, very well served by transportation, both on Central Avenue and Washington Avenue, as well as Western Avenue too. There's several routes specifically between Albany downtown and Albany uptown, but there's also a bus plus route along Central 905, and I believe a new one, if it hasn't, at least has the funding to open a purple line along Washington Avenue, making bus travel transit much quicker. And both of those lines are within a couple of blocks of these sites. So very, very important placement of these sites in that respect. This map, I believe, comes from the plan, and these are these circles specifically are different food availability of grocery stores and fresh produce access specifically within the neighborhood. And so I believe it's half a mile from a grocery store, and then a quarter of a mile from something smaller, like a Capital Roots Vegemobile or something like that. But we have seen interest in the community of adding more choices in terms of a grocery store, something like that, small food, something smaller at an urban scale as well in this project. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, so these 4 sites comprise approximately acre and a half, maybe I think a little bit more than that, maybe. At a critical corridor in the city of Albany. Here's another. So yeah, so here it's better broken down. So you have the 2 buildings, 130 and 135 across from each other. Just to kind of go back a little bit in our timeline. One thing that already did happen last week was our site tour, and some people have asked if there would be another one. I would mention to people that these buildings are in bad shape and we're actually unable to take people in them. So anyone who wasn't able to attend that site tour can actually still walk around the buildings, take a look at the terrain, and I'll show you some photos as well. But yeah, so you have the two buildings, the one at 135, two-story, much older building, I believe at one point. It may have been a bowling alley. I believe the church owned it at one point. Most recently, it was actually used in conjunction with the larger building across the street. It is a social service offices, former county Projects Drive, I think it was called. So yeah, that in total is about a third of an acre, 135, and actually goes behind the adjacent neighbor's house. So just keep that in mind. 130 Ontario Street is a sprawling steel structure, one-story building. Again, it was mostly used for offices. And I believe that's mostly what the uses were historically. So, and you can see behind there, there's additional open space, but across the street is really where there is the most potential, because they are cleared sites, not potential, but potential for new construction, parking, something like that. Those two sites together make up about 2/3 of an acre of open space. So that's really where we are on that. So I believe we have a few pictures of the inside just to show you. We'll start with the exterior. This is, I believe, from Bradford Street. This is 130 Ontario Street. Pretty long building, and again, if you go past that, the back there, you actually get to a large vacant space. Here's a photo of that. And here's some interior photos. I believe, yeah, so this is 130 Ontario Street. Again, it's in pretty rough shape. A lot of mold, a lot of water damage from years of vacancy. So you can see it here a little bit better. And there are structural problems with the roof at this point, is what we believe. 135, this is the two-story one that's had a variety of uses, a much older building. Actually, the front, I believe, is actually a newer addition in the mid-century 1950s. Again, here's some photos of that. We have a whole online tour where you can actually tour these buildings virtually on our project page. So definitely check those out, but you can see the deteriorated state of many of these buildings. It's a large project. I believe there was a fire in this one. So yeah, you can just, it's in pretty rough shape. And then again, here's what the this is West Street, and you can see the two lots on the left. That's one of the lots, and then here's kind of a view of both of the lots together. You can kind of see the expanse of the two sites. So yeah, one thing that's in the RFQ, and we've been kind of consistent with through all of our requests, is really making sure that people understand the zoning of these sites, and making sure that you understand the process if there needs to be a zoning change, but also understanding the context of the neighborhood, and really taking into consideration the surrounding area. So this is our first project actually in a form-based zoning district. So we're expecting that to be a unique challenge for developers, but also is an opportunity to create something more contextual, which is kind of the idea of those those zoning areas. So just as a little bit of context, the light gray is a neighborhood general area. Generally, you would need an entrance. You would need the main entrance to be on Ontario Street. For the two buildings, West Street is a little bit different because there isn't frontage on Ontario Street, but that's the general idea. And there are a lot more contextual and design criteria to think about. Or if there's a plan to for rezoning, then we would want to know that, and that the proposed team kind of understands what that is. But this also is a lot better for incorporating a mix of uses in a more mixed use walkable neighborhood. So that's really another thing that goes in favor of creating this community hub component on these sites. So back to Adam.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah.
So hopefully everyone that has seen the RFQ or will read it, and if you're familiar with Albany or you do go to the site, you'll see that this is a unique site in a lot of respects, including that it's at the confluence of a couple different things going on in terms of land uses, right? So Beverwick neighborhood is a mixture of residential homeowners and rental properties. There's students, there's educational institutions. Central Avenue is one of our largest commercial corridors. West Hill is a historically redlined neighborhood that is overcoming a lot of different economic challenges and high levels of vacant abandoned properties. It's predominantly Black households. And so there's a lot of there's like an industrial use nearby, an auto repair shop, and then you have residential houses on the other side. So when we talk about mixed use, that can come in a lot of different shapes and sizes as the zoning may lend itself to. So really what we're looking for in terms of the requirements, as you'll see that are set forth in the RFQ, are on this slide, right? Like when you respond, we want to see the following things. Tell us what you propose to do with the buildings. And as you've hopefully now seen, I didn't see anyone drop off the call when Will showed you the interior shots of the buildings. That's good. But as you can see from the 3D walkthroughs and the photos, it's very challenging. The buildings are in a very challenged state. They have been penetrated by water. Once those get in the buildings in upstate New York, it's kind of starts their decline. So adaptive reuse, demolition, new construction, combination thereof, all of that we're open to. We're not going to prescribe anything on what we think should happen there. That's why we're looking for the folks with the expertise and the ability to put a project together to tell us what should happen and how to fund that. We do want, like I said earlier, are requiring some aspect to include affordable housing. We just always are trying to think about how to do that through just about every project in the hopes that over time we can help alleviate some of the affordability crisis here in our area we serve. The RFQ has a whole bunch of ways to do that. These aren't the only ways to do affordable housing. Again, we're not going to be prescriptive. Some folks only want to see affordable home ownership, single family homes where we work. Some folks only want to do affordable mixed income rentals. You name it, we're open to it. Please, though, think and propose how you would accomplish that. That is a requirement. The community hub space is very important in terms of like the potential here, and it's a new concept to us and what we're trying to move along. We have more information on that forthcoming in this presentation. And then we really want to push development teams to address one or more community priorities. And we'll go to the next slide if you would. Community priorities are driven by our goals to do equitable redevelopment. And this is something we've been putting into our development efforts over the past couple of years. And really all this are principles of equitable redevelopment that we hope that you can accomplish one or more of these things. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, and they're delineated in the RFQ. One isn't necessarily better than the other, but since we're doing a project of this scale, we really want to add a couple extra benefits to create more equity, to create more equitable outcomes. And that could be anything to improving safety in neighborhoods that have sometimes challenges with public safety, or thinking about climate change and ways to combat that. Creating economic opportunities for people that live in and around the neighborhood so they can benefit and be part of the project, and it's not just happening around them. There's a lot of ways to do that. I'm sure you've seen that in other proposals. If you haven't, RFQs and RFPs, you will be in the future, because that's where we believe that community development practice is going at this scale. Next slide, Will, please. And so this is kind of probably what is the most different to most of the people that are interested in this opportunity. And this is the community hub. Like we said earlier, we just think that the physical site, the conversations with the local stakeholders, the surrounding land uses, where this is located in our countywide footprint, lends itself towards some sort of, we call it community hub, but for our purposes, that's just a term we came up with. But it's really, as defined on this slide, it's just a location for the operation of 1, 2, 3 different types of uses that benefit and serve the community and the surrounding neighborhoods. And this is just a cross section of what that could be on this slide. This is straight from the RFQ. It doesn't have to be any of these, but hopefully this gives you the vibes of the concept that we're trying to accomplish here. It could be, you know, a one-stop shop of medical, dental, and pharmacy, right? If we could do something like that, that would be amazing in one location. Or senior or youth services, or 2 similar nonprofits that are looking to expand space in the Capital District could be co-located and maybe share back office facility. I don't know, we don't know. We're hoping that you will find all those opportunities and tell us through this opportunity, through this procurement opportunity. But this is just some of the thoughts and some of the feedback that's come from the community on the opportunity that's before us here. And we really want to take a hard look at this, and we're pushing ourselves to push you guys to respond to this and rise to this challenge. Next slide, Will. So again, realizing that that's adding to the challenge of an already challenging redevelopment project, we're trying to build a bridge or meet you guys halfway, the development community, with finding those on the ground, locally based organizations, nonprofits, you name it, anyone really that's interested in being part of this. We've created a space for folks to go to our website, to put down information about the organization, what they're interested in doing, and we're going to be uploading that onto the project website from time to time as people respond. So people that are putting together the proposal responses, or development teams, respondent teams, have a resource to use. This is solely designed to be a resource. If you express interest as an organization on this list, that is not a response to the proposal to redevelop this site. That is merely your organization saying, hey, folks that are putting together teams, I'd like to be part of that. I'm interested in being part of what happens here. Here's what my organization does. Here's how you can contact me. Here's how you can learn more. This is what we do. And as you're formulating what you could do there, think of us. I'm willing to work with you, or at least have a conversation. And we want developers to see that and say, okay, well, we think we could do X, Y, Z, but we don't know who provides this type of service in the area. And then they could reference this list. You don't have to use this list. You're encouraged to, but it's only as good as the responses that we get. So I wouldn't limit yourself to this list, in case folks that are out there that could be meaningful partners don't express interest through this. It's merely just a resource to acknowledge that this is a challenge. We're asking you to go above and beyond your typical redevelopment, to do something for the neighborhood and the community. And this is our way of trying to make it a little easier on it, and frankly, create the outcomes we want to see, facilitate our own success here. Next slide, Will. The other opportunity that we want to put out there is we are willing to explore ways where the Albany County Land Bank can help. Like I mentioned from the outset, we are a quasi-governmental, not-for-profit corporation. We're also a 501c3 charitable organization. There are direct benefits to different funding sources now with the state to working with a land bank or with land bank properties. We recognize that. We also recognize that our particular land bank has good relationships with most levels of government and local and state government and county government. We do have access to special powers around real estate. We do have the ability to land bank and acquire property and hold it and assemble it. We do have access to tax foreclosed real estate that others do not. To the extent that that could be helpful, even us just helping bridge sometimes the gap that's between developers and community stakeholders, we're happy to do that. We want you to tell us how we could do that. It could go in a lot of different ways. We're really open to anything, being maybe even a partner somehow in the development, although we try to be limited in our role. We do want to be have a role in shaping what ultimately goes there and making sure that it's achieving our goals. We do lock that in through the agreements we'll talk about, but we just want to again acknowledge this is a challenging project. We're asking folks to do some pretty transformative things, and we are here to help. We're not just going to say good luck. We hope it works. We want to be somehow involved, or at least express that we are willing to be involved. So please think about it. There's more in the RFQ on what we can and can't do, but there's no harm in asking in your response to the extent it gets you to where we're asking you to be. Next slide, Will, please. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I do want to make sure that people see this. This is there. You do need to demonstrate that you are a qualified, capable, responsible developer. This, as you've seen, or you will see if you take the 3D walkthroughs, is a challenging project. We want to know that you're capable of doing a project like this. This is the response for your qualifications. You need to provide all of this information in order to be considered for this opportunity. If you are not operating at this level of experience, you certainly are encouraged to partner with someone who is. We do encourage people to form partnerships and teams and joint ventures. Really, sometimes that's the best way to do projects like this. Again, you don't have to if you're a larger, more experienced developer, but we do want to see that you are capable of doing what we're asking you to do, and that you have done it before and you've done it successfully, and you will be accountable and responsible to being potentially a partner with the land bank and delivering on these projects. So this is all from the RFQ. It's all in there. Next slide, Will.
You get all this.
The next part is how are we going to decide when we get all of these fantastic responses in? This is it. This is the response evaluation criteria. This is again straight from the RFQ. We're going to look at these categories. What's your development concept and program? That weighs very heavily. Obviously, we want to see that you put together the plan that's responsive to the development criteria and objectives that we set forth in the RFQ. The community hub concept matters to the extent that you have fleshed that out, that you have done the work, that you have tried to form the partnerships, that you have a proposal that doesn't just sound good, but is possible and pragmatic and can happen, and you have a path to do that. Do you have to have leases in hand for your occupants for the community hub? Probably not. That would certainly make for a strong response, but as long, we want to see that that isn't an afterthought, and that you've actually put a lot of work into trying to rise to the challenge that we set out with this community hub. Then obviously qualifications matters. All of this is in the RFQ. That's what the slide I just showed you. We want to make sure that you're capable of doing the things you're saying you're going to do and proposing to do and have done it. And then purchase price, right? So we do have an obligation to return these properties to productive use, but we certainly are looking for a benefit to the land bank as a nonprofit organization. It's incumbent upon us to make sure that we are generating more resources for our organization through projects like this, and to offset all the costs we had with holding on to these and assembling these sites, so we can keep doing this type of work across Albany County for years to come. So that's another 20 points there. Next slide, Will. So this is all in the RFQ. I don't want to slog through this too much, but in terms of once responses are evaluated, we will select based on the highest score, a development team or respondents to proceed into what we call a notice of award or developer designation. And that will come through our board of directors under the statutory requirements, the type of organization we are. That is essentially us designating you as a developer that emerged through this open competitive procurement. We will then start to negotiate and finalize a pre-development agreement. How are you going to do this project? How are you going to pull it together? What's the timeline? What's the financing? Is the financing real? What's the timing on getting the financing? And really what's going to be built there and when, so we're all on the same page. And then we want to go to transferring the properties, or essentially be acquiring the properties. Now, what's important here is that these properties are going to come over in a quit claim deed, because we are an organization that deals in tax foreclosed properties. We don't provide anything above that. These are as is, where is properties. We're telling you what we know about them on our website, but we do not have representations or warranties that we can go to anything stronger than that type of deed. And so we're basically going to bundle that all up into some sort of restrictive deck or something against the property similar, to make sure that what we agreed that would get built there and what we essentially selected and negotiated and finalized with you will happen by some date certain, and ensure that that performance is delivered. We're also going to require some sort of deposit to some amount to be determined to cover two pots of expenses. One, from the date of award, our ongoing maintenance and board up and reboard up and clean up of those properties as we hold them in the land bank with all the exemption benefits the land bank offers and designed to do under state law for that, but to offset our costs for doing that and essentially draw down upon that fund that's held in some sort of escrow. So we're not completely out of pocket for that. And then we do require our development partners to also provide a fund to help us with the fees and costs associated with finalizing these required agreements. So like, it's generally legal fees, but sometimes there could be consulting fees and other things. And we'll work with you on those and make sure that you know what those are, and we're tracking them. But those are things you should expect if you are awarded through this RFQ. Next slide, Will. Already talked about this. We do want to see this happen in a timely fashion, so we will work with the selected respondent on the window to acquire the properties. We recognize that sometimes sources of funding require different timelines depending on the proposal and the program. We may have flexibility there, but the takeaway from this slide is we don't want to select someone, finalize an agreement, and then just hope it happens. We are definitely going to follow on the project. We definitely want to check in, and we do this with individual building sales, and we definitely do this with larger scale redevelopments. The project's not over when we select a developer. The project's completed or successful in our opinion when it's built. And so we're going to stay along with you on that. And these are all things we want not to be a surprise if you are selected and we start to negotiate these contracts. Next, Will. Again, this is something I'm sure anyone responding is already thinking about, but I mean, these are tax foreclosed properties. You will take the 3D walkthrough hopefully and see, assume they have many environmental challenges in terms of other buildings that are vacant and abandoned of that era. So asbestos, mold, lead-based paint. You know, we tell you what we know, but we don't know too much about the properties. Like I've said, I'm sorry to harp on that, but a lot of folks sometimes aren't used to dealing with vacant and abandoned tax foreclosed properties that have come through tax foreclosure. So you really need to do your work on understanding these properties and the risks associated with projects like this that you may be taking on. And we want you to think about that now, not after the fact of putting in a response and maybe getting selected. Next, Will. put your responses in by the due date, time that's posted. It's a real due date and time. Please don't submit them late. That's all that slide really says. We don't reimburse people for due diligence. That's at your sole cost and expense and risk. That question has come up in the past. That's on a developer. We consider that part of the development team or respondents' responsibility. Sole point of contact is important. We take it very seriously on every procurement, and that's the most fair way to do it. Specific questions about this RFQ need to be directed to Amanda through this email address. We are collecting them all. We've already gotten a bunch of questions. Just because they haven't been responded to doesn't mean they won't. We're going to collect them all and post them in a Q&A document, including any that come up in this discussion, so everyone has the same playing field and knows the same answers to the questions. But that's the way to do it. There is no other way to engage us on this opportunity. So please go through Amanda and your questions through here and visit our website, and be mindful of the dates for these things, because we are moving this timeline. It's pretty rigid, and we're, the timeline is the timeline. The due dates are the due dates. Next slide, Will. And there they are one more time. They're on the website. They're on the slides. They're in the RFQ, just so everyone's following on the same page. Now, once responses come in, it depends on how many come in. Oftentimes, these are competitive projects that we've seen in our previous cluster redevelopments. We have lots of great interest from very capable teams. We want to make sure that we pick the right team. So the documents are reviewed painstakingly. So we look at every detail that's submitted and we make sure it's complete and fair. And then there's often interviews and different rounds of interviews with the selection committees or teams for these documents. So we can't give a firm timeline on that because it's really subject to the level of response that we get. And then you see the notice of award that I talked about earlier for the transaction structure that kind of kicks off the fun negotiation and legal part. Check out the website. This is like I said, everything we know, or if we get asked for it and we have it, or we somehow come up with it, we post it right on the website again, so everyone can see all the same information. And we try to give you everything we can, any associated documents or governing documents or things like that, in the interest of getting very thoughtful and meaningful responses to our challenge here that we're putting out. And it's all on the website, and check back frequently. I wouldn't check it every day, but it is your responsibility, if you're interested in responding, to check it out. But everything is going to go to this website. This is the website. It's not going to be anywhere else on our website. This is the one for this RFQ, so it's all in one place. Is this the last slide, Will? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I know that was a lot, but we wanted to make sure the key points came across, and I appreciate everyone listening here. If you would like to ask questions now, you're welcome to. I know sometimes people don't feel comfortable asking the questions in the meeting. If you want, you can put them in the chat, or you can ask them right now. We will write them down. If you feel more comfortable emailing them to the email address, we'll certainly answer them during the Q&A posting. So it's totally up to you, but will we open the floor to questions if anyone has any? And this is really the last part of today's agenda anyway.
Absolutely. Whoever wants to start, that's fine. Just raise your hand or whatever. Adam, I don't see any reason why we couldn't just put this on that page as well, the recording of this meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That'll be up in the next couple of days.
No questions? All right. Hey. Any other items, Amanda or Will, that you think would be helpful for the people who took the opportunity to do the pre-proposal meeting?
How?
There's only one thing I'm thinking about that we talked about on the site tour that maybe not everyone has realized, but there is another building behind 135 Ontario that is on the county's withdrawn list. So I just wanted to mention that because I know it did come up on the site tour. And we could
260 Bradford is behind 135 Ontario Street.
So just in case anyone wants to do any research on that, you're welcome to, but it is not a land bank building.
Yeah, so, okay, so that's a good
This is the
point.
question.
So what Amanda's referring to is, what is it, 265 Bradford, Will? Is that the address? There's a
260 Bradford,
60
behind
Bradford.
135 Ontario Street.
There's an adjacent vacant and abandoned property that it is withdrawn, which means Albany County has taken judgment to it, but they haven't taken ownership of it. They have some indication, whatever that may be, that it could potentially have an environmental issue. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. They just always are on the side of caution. But what we require develop respondent teams to do is you have to include all 4 sites in your proposal. You can't just pick one building and respond to it for this RFQ. You need to incorporate the whole site, but you're not only limited to this site. Now we're only committing to the sites we have in this RFQ for this project, but to the extent you think there's an opportunity for the adjacent property that Will just described, or another vacant property or private acquisitions, please define that in your response. But we can't commit that we could somehow figure out a way to incorporate that or award that, since we don't control what Albany County does. But we certainly would be interested in seeing what additional things could happen through your proposal. And if you are selected, we would definitely be helping with those conversations to see what was possible. I got, there's a question about the gray building, Will. I'm not sure which one.
They're probably referring to that building.
Oh,
It is a gray
that might
building.
be it. Yeah, that might be it. So hopefully we
Yes, the question.
okay. And okay, so we got a question about the timeline from the county from when they transfer properties to the land bank. So there is no like set time frame. The county does their foreclosure process under their statutory authority under state law, and then the county legislature has a process for reviewing and authorizing properties to the land bank. So it happens when they kind of get to it. We are in an interesting position in this county and many others in the state where the COVID moratoriums have essentially stopped the foreclosure process for a lot of governmental units. And so we do think that will be picking back up, but we don't know when. If there's a specific property that is of interest for a respondent above these 4, and the county has already taken judgment or has the ability to, if they might have done that already, we can request properties from the county, and then they can transfer them to the land bank if our board approves it. That process could take a few months depending on whether or not we take it or what the county's process is. So that's like the kind of way the request to get it transferred. I hope that answered the question. But generally, we're just kind of at the whims of the county when they make their lists available to us. They're larger tax lien. They foreclose by tax liens, by year, and by geographic location in the county. So city of Albany, then towns and villages. Someone asked about the property, the single family homes on Bradford. I think that was the same property we were talking about, the foreclosed property or the vacant boarded up property. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yep, I bet those are the 3 questions on the chat. Anyone have any other questions or something that we didn't address, that someone that asked a question that we didn't address it? Okay. Hearing none. Will, Amanda, anything? Brian, is there anything that we should add since I got you on?
No, I think you covered everything. Nice job to both of you, Will and Adam.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I guess that that concludes the pre-proposal meeting. I want to thank everyone, Amanda and Will for helping set this up, Brian for joining, and everyone for taking the time to listen and sign up for this and for your interest in this project. You know, I'll leave you with, like, we really want to see responses that strive to achieve what we're setting out to do by teams that are capable of doing it, and the land bank will be a partner essentially in some respect, even if it's just the way we structured it, to make sure this is successful, because we do think this is one of our best opportunities we've had in our organization's history to do something pretty transformative that could benefit not just the nearby residents, but the surrounding neighborhoods, but also the city of Albany and the county, frankly. I mean, this is a big site in the heart of the capital of New York State. So I would really encourage folks that are capable and willing to do this to respond. And thank you all for your time and consideration. Thank you all. Be well. Bye-bye.